celebrating an unprecedented situation of having 3 Kimberley Aboriginal women contesting for the seat of Kimberley in the March election. So that's just around the corner now. We've got 3 candidates, 2 of which are with me today. We've got Millie Hills representing the Nationals. We've got Naomi Pigram representing the Greens, and we've got Davina Deanna, unfortunately not able to be here this morning, but zooming in and representing Labor, pre-selected for each of those respective parties, putting up their hand to say that they want to make a difference. In our communities here, we have a lot of Aboriginal women in leadership roles, and we as a Kimberley Birds, and our mandate is to promote the voices of Kimberley Indigenous women. So we're extremely excited today to allow them this platform to amplify their voices and share their story about where they've been and why they put up their hands for this important role. So this section now is about me introducing each one and allowing them to speak personally and directly about their experiences and what they're really passionate about and what they're hoping to change. So our first speaker this morning, I'm going to go ahead and just read her bio, and then I'm going to introduce her and allow her a few minutes of her own time to just share with you her thoughts. Naomi is a descendant of the Yarru and Wajiri people of Western Australia, and as a barefoot kid from the Kimberley region, born in the late 1970s, she has seen many challenges growing up in the region. With over 25 years in the community service and arts sector, Naomi is extremely passionate about our young people and their families, and has, for many years, witnessed their struggle and pain as they try to navigate a system which rarely hears their voices. Welcome, Naomi. Congratulations on being pre-selected for the Greens Party. It's absolutely fantastic to have you here. Naomi actually did a little bit of a trick on me. She called me about half an hour ago and said, I can't make it. So this is the trickster in her that was putting my stress levels up there, but it's fantastic to have you. Can I hand it over to you for a few minutes?
Sure.
Talk about where you've been, what inspired you to go into politics. Was there a catalyst? Was there a defining moment? And just a little bit about yourself and what you're passionate about.
Yeah, sure. So this is a strange environment to tell your story, isn't it?
It is a little bit. It's a little bit tricky, but you can do it.
Yeah. So firstly, let me acknowledge that we are sitting today on the custodial lands of the Juga Nyaru people, and I want to pay my respects to my elders, past and present, and acknowledge all other First Nations people who are online and in the room today.
Yes.
And also say that I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity, Natasha, and for everyone else who's tuning in there online. My cultural heritage and where do I come from?
Yes.
So like the introduction says, I'm Yarru, of Yarru descendancy on my father's side, and on my mother's I come from the Wajiri people from the Murchison area. I grew up in this small little pearling town here in Broome, and over my childhood moved between here and Perth. My maternal family come from the Murchison, like I said, and my maternal grandmother was a stolen child, so we didn't really know that much about that side of our family. Yep. I grew up here, like I say. My dad taught me how to fish and fish for the future, so leave things behind for the next time you go out there. My grandmother taught me how to navigate a reef. She taught me that, you identify hazards, you keep your wits about you, and make sure that you get back to shore before you're swallowed up by the turning tide. So that was a beautiful life experience here in Broome. It almost sounds like a fantasy when you talk about those kind of upbringings, and that we are privileged to be part of one of the oldest living cultures in the world.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for a lot of us Aboriginal people, there's another side to our lives. And that came for me in growing up with a really hard-working single mother of 4. She devoted a lot of her life to the legal system, Aboriginal legal system. And through that time, I experienced a lot of trauma and exposure to some of the really major issues that our people are faced with today. Yeah. That part of my childhood really put me in stead for the employment opportunities that came later on in my life. For instance, I know what it's like to need to access safety. And I also understand a young person's thinking when they are forced to kind of, you know, use means to meet an unmet need.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a little bit about my upbringing. It's very balanced, and I always refer to my heritage in that I have one grandmother that comes from the fiery side of the desert people.
Yeah.
And my paternal grandmother was a beautiful, calmly spoken woman from the ocean.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the balance in the way that I explain my cultural heritage.
Yeah. Beautiful.
What career did I have before I kind of took this bush track?
Yeah, it's a bush track, all right.
Yes, well, look, the majority of my working life has been devoted to public service.
Yeah.
And community services. A lot of that time was spent with a government department where we worked with families. And I devoted an incredible amount of energy and time into ensuring that when they were navigating that system, I made it a little bit easier because I walked beside them.
Yeah.
It was very difficult to work in that kind of environment because for our families, they often explained it as working or trying to navigate through this system, and it was like a big machine, if you like. And when I absorb people's stories, I have images. And for me, it's almost like that transformer, you know the transformers that you get, big robots, and it's like a machine that they come up against. And so it's easy to become bewildered and lost. So it helps that you have people who know where they're coming from to walk beside them and navigate that system.
Yes.
The other side of that, so geez, I'm a balanced human being,
Yeah.
was in arts.
Yeah.
And you know, I've had a pretty enjoyable and successful career in the arts industry, and prior to COVID I got the exciting and beautiful opportunity to direct the revival of Brand New Day, the musical Brand New Day.
Beautiful.
And for those who don't know Jimmy Chai's Brand New Day, it is quite an incredible vehicle for reconciliation across Australia in that it highlights our humour as Indigenous people and how we use those things to manage or deal with adversity.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep moving through your
Well,
guides.
I was just going to say, when I spoke with you yesterday, we talked about how colonisation has had a huge impact on our Kimberley people here, but we've been given music, we've been given humour, and we've been given family.
Yeah.
And these three things help us to survive. And I know you're a musician, and I know that you write music and you basically tell your story and your hurt and whatnot through that medium.
Yeah, sure. And that's another part of my latest kind of employment opportunities before taking this bush track, is that I was heavily involved or have been engaged quite a lot by the Pilbara community to help initiate healing process by way of songwriting.
Yes.
So I've had amazing opportunities with those beautiful Ngalama and Yidjawandi people there.
Yes.
And yeah, done a fair bit of that stuff prior to this.
Yeah. What was the catalyst? What happened for you to go, that's it, enough is enough? I'm going to be the MP for the Kimberley.
Yeah, look, it was a very, very significant shift in my thinking, and I think that for a lot of us Indigenous people who work in those high stress situations and ones that we're like sponges, I explained to you yesterday, I'm a serious sponge, if you like, or piece of bread. And every time someone tells me a story, I soak it up.
And turn it into a song.
Oh, and therapy is to turn it into a song. Look out if it stays inside. But after many, many years of all of that, there was a turning point in 2017 where a really, really significant thing happened. And for me, that was the catalyst. It was the loss of a young person that I was working with. And he related to me through his mother. So not just inside the working space, but outside of that.
Yeah.
And that really, really was for me the change in my thinking and the need to seek other means of justice for our people in this system.
Yes.
So that was the catalyst, and I don't want to sort of go too much into depth about that situation, But absolutely, after years and years of kind of accumulation of these things, that was the catalyst that made me start thinking about other avenues to seek justice.
So you're very passionate about young people, right? That's what I see. And just recently, you posted a video online, and you said, I'm not doing this as a candidate, I'm just now doing this as a mum.
Yep.
And it almost went viral. So you've had something like 130,000 views of this social media post that you've done less than a week ago, saying the system is broken, the services aren't working, and we need help for our people because we are disadvantaged, we're marginalized, and we need to prosper. Some things have to change here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, like I said to you, Natasha, I woke up the next morning and saw the response to that personal post and thought, oh my
Goodness.
What have I done here?
Yeah.
And for a second, I questioned actually opening myself up like that in a personal space.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have now, yes, over 130,000 people I think have viewed it, but I have received so many messages and stories from people.
So that resonated with people.
Absolutely.
That message obviously touched people, deeply because they've just responded in such a huge way.
Absolutely. And they shared their stories, so a lot of people have messaged and shared their similar experience. And for me, like I said, it was a little bit bittersweet because you go, okay, I feel good that I'm able to say something that they resonate with, and I hope that relieves a little bit of pressure.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that means that we have got a serious issue in terms of this system.
Yeah.
And another thing that came to light during all of that time was that the system actually is not broken, that it's built that way. And that was a shift in thinking for me also. So this has been a very, very incredible learning journey for me so far.
Yes.
And of course, I'm always open to learning, and that really shifted some thinking for me, and actually lit a little bit more of that fire, or fueled that fire inside to go, okay, so how do we change that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Naomi. And I do want to ask you about your top 3 key things that you want to focus on, but I think I need to move on a little bit and maybe come back. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah, that's a beautiful introduction. It's very, very well spoken and articulated, I think, Naomi. I think people will really relate to that. Okay, our next guest speaker, I thought it was actually Millie, but it's not, it's Davina. Okay, our next guest speaker is Davina Diana, a Yaru, Nimbinbru and Badi woman and a local Broome resident. Being born and raised in a large family that extends right across the Kimberley, she has a strong sense of identity, connection and belonging to the region. Through her own lived experience growing up in the Kimberley, as well as having 20 years work experience in community development, social justice, native title and suicide prevention, Davina is well informed and attuned to what the needs are of the region. She strongly advocates for education, employment and training for young people, access to quality health care, safe and adequate housing across the region, as well as more support to empower and strengthen families to overcome social disadvantages. Divi, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you nice and clear. Fantastic. Okay, thanks, Divi, for being with us today. Can you share a little bit about your story? Give us a little bit of background to your background, where you've been, what roles you might have had up until this point, and what was the catalyst for you saying, I'm putting up my hand and I'm going for the Labor Party?
Okay. Thanks for having me. I'm so sorry that I can't be there. I got called away at the last minute, but I hope everyone can see and hear me along this wonderful internet. As Natasha said, I'm a born and raised woman from Broome. I'm the eldest of 8 children. My family is some of the old Broome families as well. I guess growing up in Broome and Beagle Bay, with such a large family and having young parents, I learned to grow up and be responsible, I guess. I took it on as a natural role to be a leader of my little family. I guess you have no choice when you have young parents. They don't automatically be born of how to be the best parent. So when you learn from your early years, and then you have 6 younger siblings after you, you get built up in this resilience and responsibility role of I have to do this just so they don't go through what I went through, and that kind of stuff. But yes, my mob is the Yaru and Nimanbut mob. I'm from the West Kimberley and up in the peninsula. My mother, funnily enough, as Naomi described, as her grandmother is the soft ocean influence on her. The sister of her soft ocean influence is my soft ocean influence of my mother. So I guess the feelings of growing up in such a multicultural um, society in Broome was lucky for me. However, there were some downsides with the other side of my family also being part of the stolen generation. Um, and the bad policies of that day when it was not deemed, I guess some people made choices to not really be proud of the Aboriginality where they're from and practice strong culture. So I'm also very passionate about, rebuilding culture, reconnecting with culture, not for me, but for everyone else as well. I guess I'm fully invested in the Kimberley. I've lived nowhere else but the Kimberley. As I said, I grew up in Broome, lived a few years in the East Kimberley because my husband comes from Wyndham side. His family comes all up the Gibb River. Wyndham, lived in Kununurra. So I've had the pleasure of going up and down this beautiful Great Northern Highway on all aspects. Again, that's taken me and molded me in some of my choices I made in my career. I have 4 beautiful children. Uh, I have 2 beautiful grandchildren and one that's due election week. So let's hope she comes early. But also, I guess I'm spinning. Hold on, I'm a bit nervous.
No, you're doing fine.
In my career, I guess no one ever grows up to, I'm not sure, I can't speak on everyone, but for me, I didn't grow up saying, when I grow up, I want to go into politics. I guess over the years, the experiences that I've experienced from childhood to teenage to being a mother has gradually brought me into some of the choices I've made. I worked in native title sense. I worked in the early days of Notre Dame, instilling the importance of education and furthering your education and making sure remote communities, back then the in thing was the teaching assistant education, where everyone from remote communities were coming into Notre Dame and getting, schooled up. So because they're the ones that connect mostly with those remote kids. But I did native title, social emotional well-being stuff. I guess the social emotional well-being stuff is something that is something I really feel strongly about, due to some personal incidents, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in the Kimberley. And that's the unfortunate thing, is a lot of people have had brushes very closely or know of people that have been affected by suicide. And it was scary when there was a rate, when it was coming so often that people were starting to normalize it and get desensitized to it. And I felt really like, because I call myself a soft-hearted person, and I take things into your heart. And then when I started to feel numb on some of these things, I didn't like it. I didn't like that, it's like, oh, that happened. Okay. It's like, no, that's not the right, something is going on inside of me and others when they're accepting that that's normalized. So yeah, so over my career, I did work, I tried to work in places where I'm all about the underdog, and I love to advocate on issues. Mostly reactive issues of the day tended to take me along. Some of the work that I did most in the most recent years was for empowered communities, and I had an opportunity to go into do this emerging leadership course, which was a real eye opener because, living in the Kimberley, understanding the politics, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous politics, and you think this is your world, this is what it is. And then you go over, and I had opportunities to go meet people in Victoria and how they struggle over there, in Alice Springs, and it was a real eye opener. And also in Canberra, when it was about how do we help create changes, how do we influence policies that dictate how we live on the ground. So that was kind of like in my thinking. Of course, education, health, and housing is really important to me, because they're like fundamental foundation rights, and everyone deserves to have the same when it comes to that. And I think that's what affected me to align with the party that I'm running with at the moment, which is Labor. I followed the two beautiful women before me, Carol Martin and Miss Josie Farah. I got out there, got involved, got campaigning for them, understanding and just watching them grow too as mentors, and standing up and making those changes, and knowing that they are real people from where we are from, that was meaningful too, not someone that sits on the nice sand dune hill house there overlooking the sunset, coming and telling what's best for everyone. But yeah, did I answer the question?
I think so, Divi. I think that's really fantastic. I was chatting yesterday with Naomi, just calling in with her, and I said, "How's your day?" And she said, "I've had a terrible day." And she goes, as if we don't have enough to deal with, here we are as Black women trying to now put our hand up for this really difficult role. Why do we do it? And I think what the message that we want to give out there to people, we want to pass on the message that our Aboriginal women are extremely passionate about some social change issues that need to happen in our communities, and women are actually haven't been activated. They're an untapped resource to create social changes. And this is why, from our perspective, it's so exciting to see Aboriginal women saying, look, I'm going to have to step out there, because it's really a little bit of a foreign place. It's a really unfamiliar territory. And I think women are like, oh, look, I'm not happy with the status quo. I think I'm going to have to just stop talking about something and start doing it. So I think it's so exciting to have you here. And I just commend you for having the courage to stand up, put up your hand and say, we've got some situations here that need to change. So we've pretty well put this webinar together primarily to really talk to our Kimberley people, especially. It's fantastic to have people from all the way around Australia. But we want our Aboriginal people across the Kimberley to really be engaged with the political system, obviously, and that involves registering to vote, knowing what the candidates are standing for, what their policies are. We can't go into policies today. We don't have the time. We're just sharing personal stories. But we want our Aboriginal people to understand the political space is extremely important. And people who we elect into these leadership roles are actually making decisions which are affecting us every day on the ground. So for those that don't know much about the Kimberleys, not only is it possibly the most beautiful part of Australia, but we've got about 35,000 people who live across this region. According to the last census, and we will have another census count this year, but according to the last one, there's about 35,000, of which 40% are Aboriginal. So yes, we're a little bit of a minority, but certainly we are a big cohort here in this region. We actually represent many, many language groups. We are not one people, we are many. We are one, but we represent many different languages. So there's a diversity even amongst ourselves. And the person, obviously, who stands in this role doesn't just represent Aboriginal people, they represent the residents and the constituents of the Kimberley region as a whole. And so there's a lot of things that we need to talk about, contend with, discuss. There's challenges here. And I want to come back to you, Divi, to talk about the three things that you're most passionate about. But I think I'll save it towards the end. And we might go on to Millie Hills. Like I said earlier, Millie, we've got our region here is about oceans and deserts and rivers. So we've got it all in the Kimberley region. Me and Millie are actually based in the East Kimberley. Right now, it's our wet season. So we were even debating if we could even make it here. We were like, oh, do we take a risk? Do we fly? What do we do? Because we're both on the East Kimberley side, and we've traveled a long way to be here today in Broome to come and do this webinar with you. But let me introduce to you Millie Hills, and I'll put the same questions through to her, and we'll take some questions later. And thanks very much, Divi. That's fantastic. Our final speaker is Millie Hills, who has a Bunaba and Gidja traditional ties within the Fitzroy Valley and the Kimberley. Millie is passionate for the Kimberley region and the people that have made the Kimberley their home. Millie is currently the chairperson of Uriangi Aboriginal Medical Service in Halls Creek and a board member of the Kimberley Aboriginal Medical Service, where Aboriginal people's health, education and employment issues are always at the forefront of their discussion. So welcome, Millie.
Thank you.
Thank
Natasha.
you. Absolutely fantastic to have you
Thank
here with us today, and for being pre-selected for the Nationals. Tell us a little bit about your background now, where you've come from a little bit more, and what was the catalyst for you to putting up your hand for this space?
Thank you, Natasha. Yeah, as you said in my bio, I was born and raised in Halls Creek, in smack bang in the middle of the Kimberley. We call it the heart of the Kimberley. So that's where the beating heart starts, and we spread out.
Yes.
So and I come from a family of 12. I've got 7 brothers and 4 sisters who are still around today. Which
they
I'm
bred
so
them
grateful.
tough back then, you know.
Yes, breed them tough in the Kimberley.
Yeah.
My background, like I said, I grew up in Halls Creek. I didn't grow up traditionally, but we were taught the traditional values. My mum and dad would take us out on country. My mum was a stolen child. She was taken from Fitzroy Valley in the early 1920s and placed on Mullabula Station. So she kind of lost her cultural values because she was taught the white man's way, so to speak.
Yeah.
Assimilation
policy of the day.
Yeah. So we never really got the opportunity to even learn our language. It was just the basic languages like tea and meat and all of that stuff that we were able to learn a bit of that language. But it was good growing up in the Kimberley back in the day. As a child in the late 60s, early 70s, it was the best place to be. Unfortunately, today it just doesn't seem to be like that now. Kimberley's changing. But then, that's me. And I've worked in various roles in the Kimberley. I've lived in Kununurra for 6 years. Worked in education, worked in child protection. My last job was actually a cleaner out on the construction camp, because I thought, well, I've tried everything else. One thing I need to do is go out on the construction camp and see what it's like with the guys working out on country. That's 100 kilometers from the nearest town and away from family. So I got it was an eye opener for me to see how they can cope out on country. Talking about suicide and stuff. How we can handle working in a remote area without family support and stuff like that. So that was a really good eye opener for me, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to be out on working out on the construction site for 7 months last year. I've done a lot of work in different areas. I've been with the health department, with Uriangi Medical Service, and with CAMS. I've been them with 4 years on the board. With the medical service in Halls Creek, the Uriangi Medical Service, I'd been a part of the volunteer role since 1984, and in and out being chairperson for the last 20 years, and I'm currently the chair. I've been the chair for the last 4 years now. So, and health is my main issue. My main passion. That I think we need to get our health system right for our people. I worked in the education department, so I think there's got to be some changes in the education department as well on how we deliver learning to our kids. So basically,
what was the catalyst? What was there a defining moment?
Yes, there was, for me, to putting my hand up to be a candidate. Yes, there was. I was actually sitting out on the construction site and going through the media stuff on Facebook, obviously, and realized that elections are coming up in the following year, and I thought, oh, this would be something. I went through, I had a look at some of the policies. I know you don't want to talk about policies, but that was one of the catalysts for me to actually put my hand up to run for nationals, is the royalties of regions. And I thought, yep, Brendan Grills had that down packed in his days in office. And I think that's where we actually need to bring the royalties regions back to the regional and remote areas. And I said, so that's what actually got me deciding to stand for nationals. And I think nationals has got a good way of working with that
you're comfortable
that
with.
I'm comfortable with. Yep. And
aligns with your values, right?
Yes.
Every person has taken a party that aligns with their values, of course.
Yes. So that was the main push for me, that their royalties region. I thought that's what we need to get back on track in the Kimberley. And talking about dollars, how do we tap into the dollars? Well, I think that's where we can do a lot better, bringing the dollars back in the Kimberley and spending it in the appropriate way, and getting good outcomes from it, rather than just everything's fallen down, broken, or hadn't, just hasn't been set straight for the Kimberley people.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I decided that I want to run for the election this year. And unfortunately, or fortunately, 3 of us decided to run at the same time, and we all know each other. I know the family, so it's sort of like a close knit.
It's a bit of a tricky situation. I was telling somebody, like, you guys are all frenemies now. You're all frenemies because we all know each other very well. And, we see Aboriginal women stepping up to these positions, and we're just championing you guys, because it's so exciting, because we've never seen it before, which is why we're celebrating with this Kimberley Women Make Political History. It's never happened before, but I believe that the fact that it's happened now once means you've just opened up the floodgates. I think next time there'll be 6 Aboriginal women running for it, which is a little bit of a trick, because you might start splitting the votes. It's a bit of a trick. But I think it's so exciting, because we know for a fact, right? We know for a fact, and Divi is over there too, and she'll jump on board and say, our Aboriginal women are the backbone of our Kimberley community. Our Aboriginal women are doing all the hard work, and if they were properly resourced, I believe that we can make significant changes. It's just a shame that only one person gets the role. I wish it was a group of Aboriginal women, that could be say, here, we've got the money, we know how to reinvest back into our communities and back into our families, because that's right. You change your family, you change your community. That's what it's all about. Can we go back to your top 3 issues? So Naomi, can I come back to you? And we just want to let people know it's your responsibility to find out about the policies and what the parties are standing for, and know a little bit more about it, because we can't cover it in this session. But please tell us, because we have got significant challenges across the community. We know we're in a beautiful place, but we have got challenges in every single area possible. We've got challenges in health, in housing, in education. We have high suicide rates, we have high poverty rates, and we've got drug and alcohol, substance abuse going on quite commonly in our community. So it's not like any one person is going to solve all these issues. They simply can't. But what 3 things are you going to say, this here is my area that I'm gonna do my best for if I am selected?
And you want us to talk about policy?
Oh, you can talk a little bit about policy if you're happy to.
No. Look, I think what's important is that when policy is written, or when we're going to be referring to what we stand for, it's important that it aligns with our inherent values. So for me, I ran for the Greens because one of their priorities, firstly, is in essential services. That covers education, housing, and health. They're really committed to the mental health part of that,
Yep.
So definitely that is access to those essential services, and massive priority for me.
Yep.
The next one is justice and heritage.
Yes.
So I know we don't want to talk about policy, but we have a First Nations policy at the Greens. It covers off on those 3 things: justice, heritage, and health. Like you said before, Natasha, 40% nearly of the population here in the Kimberley is our First Nations people.
Yes.
And they are diverse
Yes.
and complex in terms of
Yes.
somebody that represents all of those people.
Yes.
I'm passionate about all those things, that they are definitely priorities.
Yeah.
And they cover off on all of the things that you say are major issues for us now in the Kimberley.
Yeah.
Accessing those services
Yes.
will address underlying causes of all of those other things. And until we start looking at addressing those things and the generation upon generation upon generation
Yes.
of accumulated trauma,
Yes.
and result of colonization and all those things as a ripple effect,
Yeah.
we're never going to get anywhere. And it doesn't matter how much money you pump into that. We'll never make runs on the board because we're not dealing with the reason for these things happening.
Yeah.
Obviously, protection of country. So if I go back to just what my thing is that protecting country and community are a massive priority for me, and that encompasses all of those things.
Yeah.
Fracking in the Kimberley is a big thing. It will impact our environment.
Yeah.
And for Kimberley people, we live, and it doesn't matter what color or creed you are, people come and they gravitate to the Kimberley region because of its beauty.
Yes. It's true.
And the richness in the country.
Yeah.
So I advocate very, very strongly on the protection of country.
Yeah. Beautiful. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Divi, can I go to you now?
Yep.
All right. Can you please share with us your top 3 areas?
I think the top 3 areas, I guess, in regards to why I chose to run too, and the focus would be about health, education, and housing, but also, job opportunities. When you say job opportunities, it can't be just about here's lots of jobs. It's about building capacity for our mob to take those opportunities hands-on, That means education. They have to be educated enough to take some of those opportunities, real meaningful opportunities up in regards to having some of those jobs. How do you get educated? You make sure you have good education systems, you have a good home so you can go home, go to sleep, get up, learn, get those foundations. So how do you do that? You have good housing, you have good home environments. So not just the infrastructure, but the social and emotional environment in which they live in. I think there are many issues, but counting it down to that, I really believe that they're all interlocked, and a holistic approach is needed to really build capacity or empower people to stand up and take opportunities in the long run. One of my other passions is about young leaders or young people, and educating them and building them up inside to be okay with themselves, to go and feel confident to go out and move up and do things in the world. I've had the pleasure of working in my career with a lot of old people throughout the Kimberley and hear their visions and their challenges and their frustrations over it's still long, it's still happening, we're still trying to fight for this, we want this, and it's sad and it's heartbreaking. I guess that's one of the things that also pushed me, because it's a new world too. As Millie mentioned earlier, the Kimberley today is not the Kimberley as it was. So, equipping these young people with the tools to cope with this generational shift in society, and put them up and promote them up and take up the baton to, take this old vision into this new world. So young people, empowering young people, whether they're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, is important to me too. Actually, it is very important. But I guess those are the 3 things that I will be focusing on. But yes, it's about building the community together, I believe. And that's when I say holistic approaches, because focusing on one obviously creates rifts in other spaces or gaps. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Divi. I think that's a really very valid point that you're making there in regards to a holistic approach that really needs to be taken with our people rather than working in silos. And sometimes I know for a fact that services are not connecting, or they're not actually talking with each other, or they're actually trying to, gather together the clients that they're working with, and it's actually not helpful. And we're really experiencing some really significant problems here across the Kimberley. And this is why it's so important for us as Aboriginal people and Kimberley residents to talk about these things and use platforms like social media to be able to express our thoughts, raise our concerns, and say, we're not accepting the status quo of the situation that our people are currently in. So we know for a fact hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are coming into the region. And where is it at? And what are we seeing changing? And how are our people being empowered? That's what we're really trying to work towards. So thanks, Divi. Thanks very much. Millie, can I turn to you now and talk about what 3 things that you feel strongly about? We have got a huge issues.
Yeah.
What do you want to focus on? You can't tackle everything.
Yep, exactly what you said, Weena. We've got huge issues in the Kimberley, but I think education is the key to everything, learning, regardless of how old you are, whether you're just a little toddler to an adult. It's like you need to be educated to learn about, what it is that's happening in your own backyard.
Yeah.
So education, and I'd be pushing that for, all walks of life. Like, if you don't know nothing, if you don't know anything, go out and read and find out, what it is.
Yeah.
So get yourself educated in regards to fracking.
Yes.
Find out what it is that would cause, the environmental issues.
Yes.
The river system. Find out, what could be. So education, I say, would be the main thing. And health is another one. If you're not healthy, you can't do anything.
Well, people are dying way ahead of their time.
Way ahead of their time. So I think, education and health would be the biggest thing that I'd be pushing.
Yeah.
And employment. I believe that with the COVID stuff that's happening now, and businesses are short of staff, can't get staff. So I'm thinking, well, I call it a one-stop shop for everything. So, we've got the job pathways, who's got participants sitting on their system, getting trained up. So I'm thinking what the businesses in the Kimberley could actually start negotiating and talking, like as I had that conversation with job pathways, who's got people lining up for jobs. That would alleviate some of the issues the businesses in the Kimberley would be experiencing, because they're talking about backpackers can't come over. Why can't we get our Indigenous people out there farming, collecting fruit? Where if it's seasonal, well, so be it. It's a job. You've got people on the ready to go. So I think communication is the biggest. Is a big key too. You need to communicate a lot of this stuff backwards and forwards, and people need to really understand what it's like living in the Kimberley, where the jobs are available. I mean, I've done the cleaning job. I went from being a team leader in child protection back to a cleaning job, but I'm not saying back to a cleaning job, to a cleaning job. So there are jobs out there.
You did what you had to do.
I did what I had to do to learn and to educate myself in regards to what are these businesses like? What's it like working in them? And so I went out and made a point of learning that myself, and I think that's what we need to do. Make a point of getting to know it. If you don't know it, find it. You can Google it nowadays. You can Google up your answers to any questions. So you can educate. Kids are on the phone all the time, so teach them how to Google questions and answers, and what happens if you get into trouble. If you're going to go and break into a house down the road there, the consequence is going to be this.
Yes.
So education is the biggest key to living a life that would make it better for yourself, and that's what I'd be concentrating: education, health, and employment. And like you said, a lot of the other, we're not going to drop the other issues, like Davina was saying. We're not going to push them aside.
No.
But the main thing now is with our juvenile crime that's happening. Well, education would be a key to that.
Encompass that. And what about some parental support, or for parents to be empowered themselves in taking responsibilities for their children? Because sometimes maybe places like DCP make that a little bit difficult sometimes.
It is, and I think what needs to happen is they need to be more engaging with the families.
Yeah.
They need to, it's not about just sitting in the office and writing up your reports and ticking the boxes.
Yeah.
It's about having a relationship with the people you work with, and engaging with them.
It is so
building
true.
trust, it's all about, you're living in a small, Kimberley is a small, it's a small area. I mean, I've got family that live in every town in the Kimberley.
Yeah.
And I travel the Kimberley, travel from Kununurra to Broome quite often. So
yeah.
it's like, well, we're a small Kimberley region.
Yeah.
Why can't we all work together?
Yeah.
Agencies need, like you say, agencies can't work silo. They need to work in cahoots, work together,
collaboration.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. And you say Kimberley is just a small area. It's actually quite a big area to some people. Like Mari said this morning, it's double the size of Victoria. It's actually a reasonable size, but for us, driving 500 k's or 1,000 k's is neither here nor there. It's what we do and how we get across our territory. And you're right, we're all connected. But what I have just observed, and I had to really be careful today because I obviously got my own opinions about how things should be and what my priorities would be if I was a candidate, but I just feel like there's a real disconnect sometimes between services and people on the ground, and I put that down to like a lack of cultural competency or lack of cultural awareness, or the fact that Aboriginal people are relational. That's how it is. Aboriginal people are about, hey, where are you from? Who's your mother? If they can't place you, they're like, who's your grandmother? Who's your sister? Who's your mother? And this other way too of connecting by our skin group system, So I'm Nyoru, you're Nangala, in a Blackfellow way, you're my grandmother. So people have that added complexity in regards to how they're connecting and relating to one another. And I think if people are oblivious to those realities, how can you be effective if you don't know the foundational things?
That's right. It comes back to educating them. If you're going to be working, in a area where it's predominantly Aboriginal people, you need to get educated in how it works there. If you're going to be working predominantly in an area where it's non-Aboriginal or someone from overseas, you've got to get educated in learning their culture.
That's what I think. If you're coming to a region and you've got a big Aboriginal population, the onus is on you to learn a little bit more about the cultural ways. And behaviors and attitudes and priorities of the people that you're working with, I think. Is that
that's right. Like, you've got to engage with the people that you're working with to get a good outcome.
You must connect, not be like, oh, I just work at these hours and see you later. I'm back on Monday. Because people are having dramas on Saturday night, as per your social media post.
And I think what another level of that too, Natasha, is not only are we relational people and the need for cultural education of all of these services and people that provide those supports directly with our families. Whilst the importance and onus should be on our relational way to relate, the system needs to reflect that for those workers. What we have to remember, and the government department that I was talking about is child protection also. So the majority of my time was spent in that. The system itself and the frameworks, the practice frameworks that you are bound to work within in those systems do not accommodate the Indigenous relational way of communicating.
We need a different way.
Absolutely.
Of engaging in a different, we need to use innovation. And I think sometimes, when you're a minority, when you're the smaller voice in the room, it's hard to be heard and understood.
The other thing too is, like Millie said, if you going to those training education or the training providers to say there's a whole bunch of Indigenous people sitting there on a waiting list. Why are we not employing them in these helping professions? Because they are the ones who will relate and already have the skill and education in terms of that communication capacity. It's a no-brainer to me.
Absolutely. Debbie, you're a little bit away from us, so someone we forget sometimes. I'm sorry, did you want to say anything there?
Sorry, the line went a bit patchy. I'm so sorry, Natasha. As you know, I'm in Halls Creek. And
that's fine.
I went in and out of that for the last 2 minutes. Sorry, but I did catch important points, girls.
Yes. No, look, it is fantastic. Can we go to a few questions now that have come in from,
Sure.
Just different things, and Kat, maybe at your end as well. Can I just tune in with you, Kat, for a second? Kat, were you going to be collecting some questions from the audience fairly soon?
Yes, I do have a question that's come through early on. It's from Sam Jones asking, do you support the calls for safe spaces for young people to be dropped off at in the community?
Okay,
These are young people. I think more specifically, these are young people wandering the streets at night.
Right. Okay. I don't know if that's something that's happening in our communities. Any of you guys
I think,
familiar
yeah,
with it?
I think maybe it's recently in Broome, there was an article about the suggestion that we might have a crisis accommodation for our young people instead of returning them home, or, you know, the young people who have nowhere to go in the middle of the night. So it's there to alleviate that pressure, if you like, or find somewhere for them to go. To answer the question about whether or not I support that kind of thing, safe places, for me, it depends on what that safe place looks like.
Yeah.
I am certainly not in support of a Band-Aid approach to drop our kids off in the middle of the night to sleep there, to go back to where. My question to that is, do we have the intention to put our children into these places forever? Because I'm pretty sure they need to return home at some place.
Yeah.
I'm more committed to working on the causal issues and why they're on the street in the first place, rebuilding families so that they actually are not out in the street but want to stay at home instead of roaming the streets.
Yeah. Yep. Billy, did you have a comment about that, or you happy to bypass? Or?
yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy with what
Sorry,
she
were you
just said.
done? Yep. You agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Yep. Divi, did you have anything extra to add to what Naomi just said?
Yes, I totally agree with Naomi. You know, nobody wants a Band-Aid solution. I do recognize the discussions have been going around the community lately about safe spaces for kids. And,
Yep.
you know, sure, I think more discussion needs to be had into, rather than just saying, let's just give them a safe space, more discussions are required to discover what is that safe space, what does it look like, what does it mean long term? Is it just an overnight sleeper? Is there follow-up services? But you know, I guess safety for children is key. You know, I went to communities lately and had an opportunity to speak to one of these deadly young youth workers that stayed with kids that didn't want to go home and kept them occupied. Is it a safe space for those kids, you know? But yeah, definitely more discussion needs to be had. But eventually, if it's what the community kind of is leaning towards, and there's a real plan rather than just a Band-Aid solution, then yeah, it's something worth considering.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Dave. Another question that I've got coming in from the Kimberleys is, so just recently I'm aware of certain reports, and we're all aware of certain reports that continue to be produced here. So it's basically evidence and data that are telling us this information. Not that we don't know it already, we do, because we've got eyes and we've got ears and we live here. So when reports and certain research is being done and it tells us certain things, it just confirms what we actually already know. And one of the situations of really big concern is the low literacy and education attainment of our kids through the schooling system. So I'd like to go to each one of you in regards to how you would respond to that. What's your, and I might chuck it to you first, Millie, because I went last time to
certainly I can go
Naomi.
first.
So yeah.
Yeah, you know,
And you mentioned education as one of your top priorities anyway.
Yeah, I did, and I think numeracy and literacy is a big issue with our kids. But I think we need to have a look at the school curriculum. Maybe there needs to be some changes within the education system in regards to what our kids should be taught. Obviously they've got to be taught the skills for life. And you know, I call it a skills for life program that the school could probably implement, where, you know, we got the kids, you actually, you know, taking them out on country.
Yeah.
You know, obviously their numeracy and literacy skills is so low.
Yeah.
They're not going to sit in a classroom and sit at a desk and write things. You know, they'll just run amok. And you know, I've seen that myself. I've witnessed that on many occasions working at the school.
Yes.
And I think you know, going out on country, teaching them. So, you know, if the schools, the education system could allow for that to happen with our elders, our Indigenous elders that are out there through the Language Resource Centre, through CALAC, Kimberley Aboriginal Law and Culture. I think in the Kimberley region that, you know, we could probably support the kids learning through life skills program in the first instance.
Yes.
And then, you know, other stuff can come later. But like, you know, like you said, numeracy and literacy is the biggest issue for our younger kids nowadays. Well, even if for our older ones, you know, they're still struggling. And I think, you know, going out on country, teaching them, you know, you could count rocks. You don't have to sit in a classroom and count blocks. You can go out and count rocks.
There you go.
Out on country, you know, and sticks. So, you know, I think the education department needs to look at ways of how we can even be inclusive with our kids, because the kids don't want to go to school if they know that they can't read and write, because they'll get teased.
Yes.
You know, there's bullying happening.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's one reason why, that's one obstacle. That's, you know, that they don't want to go to school because they know they're going to get bullied and teased because they can't read and write properly. And I've had that, you know, the kids tell me that all the time. So, but the minute you take them out bush, you give them a pack of cards, they can count. You know? So I'm thinking, you know, something that they're comfortable with. You know, that they can actually, they can learn. You know, if you're not comfortable sitting at a table reading something, you're not going to learn nothing. So, you know, I think we really need to look at, and I think if the education department, we did have actually a school council in Halls Creek set up with the Indigenous parents, but I think that was more policies for the school. I think we need policies for the town, for, you know, our locals. I think, you know, we need to actually change a lot of that to say, well, we actually need to be looking at how we can get our kids back into the classrooms and getting them learning in a way that's going to, you know, bring them out at the end of it, you know, that they can actually handle society.
Oh, definitely.
You know,
and look, one of the things that my mother used to say growing up when we were kids was education is power, knowledge is power, you know? And I look across the Kimberleys and I see one challenge that our people have is not mastering the English language. You know, because everyone's got their language and everyone's pretty much got Creole, but you can't take Creole to Canberra.
No.
You can.
Well, it's harder. I think it's harder to work, and this is where we want our people to be really comfortable to navigate both systems. It's about education. So you're not going to take away from our heritage. We're proud of our heritage. We are who we are, and that's going to be our strong area because that's where our connection is at. But how can I go to Canberra and communicate to people or anywhere? How can I fly internationally? How can I go anywhere to an airport over the phone to someone who's speaking standard Australian English? And I think part of that is at the school system where we're, getting people to grab a hold of that English as well. Yeah. Devi, did you want to add anything to that? The original point was about the illiteracy.
I would like to add that numeracy and literacy levels are not the best, and you know, education is important, especially when you're building strong young people now to be the leaders of tomorrow. However, unfortunately, Natasha, I'm so sorry, and the rest of the world that's watching, I've been summoned to leave because I have actually, speaking about education, I'm here with the Deputy Premier making important educational announcements in Halls Creek, and just opened the door, so I have to leave. I'm happy to take any questions further and answer any questions at the later date, as you said on Thursday, maybe.
Absolutely.
And thank you so
we'll
much.
Talk more later on, Div.
Thank you so much for having me, and bye, Millie and Naomi.
Bye.
Thanks, Debbie. See you later.
See ya.
Yeah.
So education.
Education.
I have something to add.
Please.
Education is absolutely imperative to our development as a people or our young people.
Yeah.
If numeracy and literacy is the issue, and our education system and how to communicate and get through to our children is the issue, we firstly need to start with a strong foundation.
Yes.
Nobody is able to concentrate and learn how to read and write and count if they are cognitively not able to retain the information.
Correct.
Now, on a whole scale, and if we're talking about all children in the Kimberley, They need to come from a strong foundation to be able to be healthy in the mind, healthy physically, to be able to go to school and retain what their teachers are teaching them, whether it's the general school system or culturally.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for us, or for most of the Indigenous children, and I'm not sure we haven't mentioned it, but for Indigenous kids, they represent 100% of the child protection kids in care in the Kimberley.
It's reality.
Which would suggest to me that these children are exposed to trauma in early childhood. Now, I don't know, a long time ago, trauma-informed practice was a massive, big thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And if you look into the impact of trauma on a child's cognitive ability to learn or retain or take things in, you'll find that there are a massive, a broad, it's a complex issue. It's not just something that you can,
Yes.
grasp
Yes.
in one session.
Yes.
So my suggestion then would be to put the work into strong foundations and education with the families and building strong home life foundations so that our children can go to school or out bush, sit with their elders or within a school institutional kind of system to learn, but that they will be able to be healthy in the mind to retain information.
Yeah.
With that, we don't have a hope.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's correct. Let me move to another question from a Kimberley person. And I would have thrown this directly to Davina first, because I know she's worked very much in this space in regards to native title and stuff, especially. But this question is about how can we have more Aboriginal people access that money that's coming into the Kimberley? Because there's an inequity there. There's a financial, there's an inequity there with our people are living in high poverty, situations. And I feel like there's money coming into the region. And how can we help Aboriginal people to get their hands on some of that funding, do you think? So they're financially empowered in their own, so we can move away, and I think economic empowerment is what I'm trying to get to here. And I wanted to mention the fact that the Kimberley has been very largely native title determined. So we've got our land back. We're actually people, many of us are part of our own PBCs, and we're talking up for our own countries and our own people and stuff. There's money coming in. How do we translate now our land into like a financial wealth, and also access some of that money coming in to say, we can make a change here with finances because it's being utilized in a better way. Who wants to go first?
You go.
It's a bit of a tricky question.
I'll give it a go. Okay. Well, obviously there's a lot of Indigenous funds coming into the Kimberley region through, different program areas, through different organizations.
Yeah.
I think, maybe one thing is, we need to maybe have a look at these organizations that are getting the funding.
Yes.
Really reviewing, what they really are all about.
Yes.
So, it's like, okay, so if, say, Uriangi Medical Service gets health funding, so, and we've got a whole heap of programs running out of the medical service, the tackling Indigenous smoking, the social emotional well-being, quite a few. So, that money's, obviously, Aboriginal people are having access to health systems, especially in the AMSs.
Yes.
But in other areas, obviously not. Like you said, people, if you've got an opportunity for a small business, how many of those Aboriginal people are tapping into a small business enterprise and, wanting to do that, and where are we going to get the funds for that? In regards to land, native title stuff, I think traditional owners and station pastoralists, farmers who are actually on traditional land, there should be some way of them coming together. You've got the have a group that sets up land and pastoral and farmers issues, so that the TOs and the pastoralists can sit and have a yarn about, how can we actually make this work for both of us?
Yes.
You've got the cattle, I've got the traditional ownership of this land. What can I get out of this if you're going to be, selling cattle and selling veggies and fruit and stuff from the land that belongs to me? How can I tap into that as well? So I think, like you say, closing the gap, I'd say open the gate. I mean, I've always said open the gate and let us get on with our lives. Let us
Yeah.
work together. You know, we're the ones who live in the Kimberley,
Yeah.
regardless of race or color.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, we've made it our home.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah.
let us have a look at all these money that's coming into the
Yeah.
Kimberley region
Yeah.
and see where it's being siphoned to.
Yeah.
You know, and whether people are benefiting from it.
Yeah.
And which would be very interesting to see.
I think so, and I think it comes back to your point earlier. I think about education, because part of being, you know, educated is also learning skills like negotiation skills.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
knowing your rights, knowing your worth, and being able to have a conversation with someone fairly straightforward, like a robust conversation.
Mhm.
You know, so like someone with a pass release, I think they've got that. Even though someone has native title, if they've got a pass release, I think they can manage them. But it's really about trying to build bridges.
Mm.
So there's got to be a lot more work done in the area, I think, of reconciliation.
Yep.
And understanding, you know, and I remember talking to a friend and she said, look, I feel like Aboriginal people have come a long way to learning about Garia, like white people, you know, and I feel like it would be good if non-Indigenous people came a little bit closer to Aboriginal culture and tried to learn a little bit deeper. And that involves deep listening.
Yep.
Which you have to have good patience. You have to be patient, and you have to have empathy. And you must have a good understanding of the history of the place that you're working in. So when things are happening and things are manifesting in front of you, you go, we understand. Because this has happened over here. So that's a logical response now to something that happened back here. You know, putting dots together. Yeah. What's your thoughts, Naomi?
In terms of our people accessing the money that's poured into the Kimberley,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with Millie on how interesting that would look like if we were to call an inquiry or an audit into all the money that was coming in here. Well, I think if we get enough people power together, we might be able to, because we're not benefiting on the ground by any means from the millions of dollars that are poured in here.
Hundreds of millions of dollars that are coming in.
Not really a mystery, Natasha. If we start seeking outcomes, a report on outcomes, rather than who's walking through the door, and continuously funding services that say, oh, well, I service this
Ticking
many
boxes.
people, ticking boxes, mate.
Yeah.
I don't care about how many boxes you tick in a day.
Yeah.
I want to know what the outcome of your service was.
Yeah.
3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years down the track.
Yeah.
Did that person need to come back after your service and access it again?
Yeah.
How many times in that 3 years did they have to come back?
Yeah.
Or is your service actually of quality,
Yes.
and you've seen them out the door and they've walked and progressed in life and no longer need your services?
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what the aim should be,
Yes.
that the people that come through those doors don't need to access that service ever again.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it comes to do with native title,
Yeah.
that's a very, very complex issue. And like you said in the very beginning, we come from the Kimberley region, which is full of diversity in terms of cultural aspects.
Yes.
Yes, I think it's how many now? Over 90-something% of the Kimberley is
Native
covered by
title
native
zone.
title
Correct.
land. I believe the answer to our people accessing money from our own native title bodies lies also in relationships.
Yes.
I think that we've started to set up our native title things in a very government-like fashion, and I'm only speaking for my own.
Yes.
I'm certainly not speaking for anybody else in the Kimberley, but as a native title member from this area, you know, a lot of the programs and things set up there, to me, replicate a government system.
Yeah.
And a lot of effort and energy needs to start going back onto the ground and rebuilding those relationships. Native title is a very, very taxing, emotionally taxing thing for our people.
It is.
And offers very little rights, really, once you get it.
Yeah.
Yes, we have the right to negotiate what happens on our country,
Yeah.
but we by no means have the right to say no to things.
Yes.
That needs to change, I think.
Yeah.
And I think a big, big focus, even from our native title bodies, on relationship building and finding out and genuinely caring about what our people on the ground need, and in order to raise their level of living
Definitely.
is the answer.
Yeah.
Same thing applies.
Definitely.
We are relational people. Let's go back down to the ground.
Yeah. And look, can I just make a comment here in regards to Aboriginal people? So we're Kimberley women. We're people of this particular region, and so we are our own, you know, unique people group. And I you know, I just admire the beauty and the strength, in particular, of our Aboriginal women and men, of course. And I see that there's such a just a gentle, quiet, soft nature, which is, you know, very much a part of our people. And this is why we haven't hopped up and down, you know, and said, we don't accept this, you know, because our blood can boil when we see our people in the situation that they're in after all these years of so-called investment, and yeah, people are doing this and people are doing that. And because our people aren't aggressive in nature, you know, because our people they're not activists, you know what I mean? And it's like, hey, we need to incite some kind of anger here, not violence. We don't talk about violence. We need to incite some like passion and righteous anger to say we don't accept these outcomes. And so we probably better get marching to a Kimberley march, you know?
Leave that for you, Tash.
To say, no, we've just been accepting it because that's our nature, but no more, because we're fighting now and we're standing up for our children and our children's children. So this business here, this failure that's happening across our region, we don't accept it, and we need to empower our people, eh?
Yeah, it's not acceptable.
Yeah, somebody got to say amen to that.
Amen.
Yeah. Kat,
Yes.
have we got any questions through on your chat box?
Yes, we do. We've got several questions, although we are running out of time now. So just on that last note, Natasha, I think you're absolutely right what you're saying about, you know, Indigenous people all over the country, you know, not rising up. But I think actually what's happening all across the world actually is we're seeing a lot of women rising up. A lot of women have been, we've all experienced oppression from, you know, dominant leadership, usually patriarchal leadership. And I think this fervor for women to rise up is a global movement, and it's really affecting women of colour in this country. It's affecting all women in this country. Licia Heath from Women for Election Australia is rallying women all over the country, right? And so it's people like that, and people like Licia, and people like you, Natasha, and you know, Millie, and Naomi, Davina as well, just coming together and saying, okay, we've had enough. Let's work together, even though we all might be in different political parties or on different sides of politics. We can still link arms and all move together and, you know, affect change. So it's really great hearing your conversation. Really appreciate you ladies all sharing your opinions and speaking from the heart, because it's incredibly inspiring. It's really important for us to hear these messages because you motivate us, right? And it's just fabulous hearing it. So thank you so much. We have 4 minutes left. Natasha, I'm going to throw back to you for that final question to the ladies.
Yeah. All right, ladies. So, I mean, Davina is off now, but the last question was, we mentioned in the very beginning in regards to how not enough of our people are really engaged in that political space, and we need to get there. We need to know who people are, you know, what they're running for, what they're all about, and you know, and taking that strong lead. But what advice would you give for anybody else out there that's looking at you now as a bit of a inspiration? And they're looking at you as a bit of a role model, and like, oh, how has she been so brave to go and do that? Because they might talk around the table about what they want to see change, but they don't want to literally put up their hand for Parliament. So what's your advice? Millie, I'll go to you first. What's your advice for a woman out there thinking, yep, I feel strongly about these things. I think I've got a way to fix some of these, you know, problems. What's your advice to her? Because you've been on a journey. You've been on a journey.
Still on a journey.
And you're still on a journey. But so far from what you've learned, what words of encouragement or support would you give to someone watching now who might be aspiring to run for politics later?
Be open and transparent. I think is the main thing. And be accessible to people. When people, because right now, you know, I've had so many phone calls, so many messages, so many emails. You know, you've got to commit yourself. So you know, that's one of the advice is commit yourself, because if you're on the trail that Naomi, Davina and I are now, it's a pretty hectic one at the moment. And it's like, you know, you've got to be on the ball. and financially as well.
You
I think,
contribute yourself.
yeah, financially, you know, you've got to have some money. You've got to have some money in the bank, and to be able to, you know, to be able to do your campaigning. So, you know,
Marketing and all
marketing and that. But yeah, so you just got to be really committed, and be open and transparent and honest.
Yeah.
I think that's where you get people to really trust in you and
And show that you're authentic, right?
Yeah, that's right. You got to be you got to be out there.
All right, brilliant. Naomi, what's your advice for aspiring politicians out there?
Self-belief.
Yep.
You know, I'm just going to bring it straight back down again to that thing of backing yourself. This time around for me, I got asked, and it was the belief in me from an old friend of mine that started to make me believe.
Yes.
And I actually prepared something today, but in the end, just having a yarn with you. So, you know, so I was going to actually finish off what I had written anyway with a little bit of a lesson that I'd learned from these beautiful women in a prison that I'd worked with.
Yes.
Who, you know, a big barrier for us was self-belief.
Yeah.
So it goes a little bit something like this, and I won't sing it, I'll say it.
Yeah.
It says, we are mothers.
Sing it if you want to.
No.
You've got a beautiful voice.
Nah. So we are mothers, and we are sisters, and we are lovers, you see. We are daughters of ancients from land and the sea. We travel these highways, and we search for our dreams. And we are someone to someone, and we are someone to me.
Good one.
That is divine. What a beautiful, beautiful way to finish it. Ladies, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate and wish you all the very best on this journey.
Thank you.
And we'll be there on, what is it, the 13th of March?
Mm-hmm.
We'll be there voting.
Yeah.
Not quite Black Friday.